My name is Hunter Young. I'm a project manager for EPA. I've been a project manager for EPA in the Superfund program for 8 years now. 5 years here in Portland, working on the Portland Harbor Superfund site. Spend too much time thinking about the Willamette River. And so I'm here to help introduce Bob Wyatt with Northwest Natural. He's going to be talking tonight about the ISS field pilot. First, I want to mention the challenges that Bob and his team face at the Gasco site. It's a heavily impacted area, various contaminants in various states at pretty significant depths. There's no easy solution to cleaning up the Gasco site. We spent a lot of time trying to find solutions at the site and to move cleanup forward at the site. Northwest Naturals brought us a concept that we're excited about. EPA expects Northwest Natural to bring us a protective cleanup, something that's protective in the long term, something that's protective in the short term. And after a lot of years of consternation trying to find the path forward, they brought us something exciting that we think could provide a really robust cleanup for the site. And so we're going to learn more about that field pilot. And I'll just mention that these field pilots are done. It's a way of testing a concept. And so we're going to go out there in the field and test this concept in order to prove out that it is the right fit for this cleanup. And so with that, I'll hand it over to Bob.
Just a note for questions. If you have questions, if you don't mind holding them to the end so we can get the full recording of the presentation, and then we'll facilitate Q&A with people in person and online once Bob wraps up.
Thank you. Can folks hear me okay? And Hunter, thank you. And I will say it is a challenge working on these projects. Having a good relationship with EPA and a shared interest in moving these forward to clean up is really helpful for us. And so, we're all in getting this done as quick as we can. So with that, I'm here to talk about something that's very exciting to me. I've been working on this project since it was listed in the year 2000. So 23 years for me. I really want to see the cleanup happen. It's a life goal of mine now. I've been living in Portland for 30 years. I love the river, and I'd like to see it get cleaned up. I'd like to be a part of that. And so we're going to talk today about what I believe is a really important step to getting something in place that takes us a meaningful step forward with that. So without further ado, tonight what I'm going to talk about is basically the vision for cleanup for the site as we currently see it. And that's a new concept, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit as we get a little bit further in the presentation. But then I'm going to talk about the pilot study itself. What are the objectives of the pilot study? What is the actual work going to look like? And when are we going to do it? So the Gasco site is probably a site everybody in this room has heard about. You probably know where it is. It's in the shadow of the St. John's Bridge. It's on the west side of the river. It's where that little red box is. This lists a lot of the milestones that we've talked about over the years. But the main one that I'm going to talk about today is what Caleb talked about, Hunter talked about, and it's design. We are in the design phase for Portland Harbor. Northwest Natural submitted a design back in 2021. So that design was consistent with the ROD. It was dredge and cap. So dredging, everybody knows you're bringing contaminated material up through the water column, and you're doing that a lot over a number of years. And all of that has to be hauled somewhere for disposal. After we submitted that preliminary design, we got comments from EPA. And the comment was, can you dredge some more? How much more can you get out before you put that cap down on top to contain what's left? And we looked and we looked and we looked, and there was no way to get it all out. It's just technically not possible. So we thought to ourselves, how do we address the intent of this comment, which is to get all of the chemicals that exceed the cleanup levels, the action levels addressed? And so the concept is what I presented on back in December of last year. So the folks who were here in December of last year have already seen this information in some form. But that's what I'm going to be talking about today. So this is what we'd like to do in our cleanup. If we revise the design and resubmit it later this year or early next year, this is what it would look like. The light blue there is where we do this in situ stabilization treatment technology. Where you see the darker blue, we would dredge everything, no cap. So there would be nothing left exceeding the action levels. So we'd basically be either treating or removing anything that exceeds the action levels at the site. And we can't imagine a more protective way to approach this particular project area. You see the little box up there in yellow? That's where the pilot study is going to occur. And so we're actually taking that area and using this technology in real time to make sure it's going to work. We want to make sure we don't have water quality issues. We want to make sure the technology can be applied efficiently, and we want to make sure it's going to be effective. This is the same remedy, but it's in profile. And so what you see here on the left, these green columns, that's how we place the treatment material. We actually put augers down, we mix in treatment material into the sediments that then treats those materials. And then offshore, you can see that other set of arrows. That's the area that we would dredge. So this is looking at it in cross section. So it's a great idea, right? We think it's going to work. We took it to EPA. They were very excited about it, but it's not something that has been used in the Willamette River before. It's been used in some other river systems. It's been used effectively all over the country in soils, but we want to make sure it's going to work here in our conditions. And the only way to do that is to try it. So when I went to Hunter and I said, we really want to try this, Hunter said, yeah, let's do it. So this is the study we've designed, and this is the work we're going to be talking about tonight. This is what ISS looks like. This is the same photo I showed back in December of last year. Obviously, this is in the land. I'm showing you this because if I just showed you it in a river, all you would see is water. But this is the equipment that we used to mix the treatment materials into the soil on the left. And you can see the surface of the treated materials in the hole on the right. There's a lot of benefits to the treatment approach. We can, at Gasco, Hunter said, we have contamination at depth, 20 or more feet in areas. So with the treatment technology, we can actually treat all the contamination that exceeds the action levels, regardless of how deep it goes. We can't physically remove it, but we can treat it. So that's one of the major benefits. The other thing is, if whatever we remove after we put the treatment in will be treated material. So we're not hauling heavily contaminated material untreated to landfills. So there's a lot of benefits here. One of the other benefits that I think is a really positive aspect of this approach is that once we've completed the installation of this material on the whole site, we can contour the surface so that it can support a good habitat layer. Right now, there's steep banks, there's uneven shelves that make up the profile offshore of Gasco. With this technology, when we're done, we can make it look really good if you're a fish. So that's one of the other real strong benefits here. I won't read all these bullets for you guys. I'm sure this presentation is going to be available. So what are the objectives of this test? Well, we want to check water quality. We want to make sure when we do this work, we're not going to have an immediate or long-term effect on things in the river, whether it's fish or the communities that live in the mud, or the people. And so we're going to use moon pools. I'm going to show you a picture of a moon pool. It's a cool word. We actually use moon pools at a cleanup we did for DEQ a couple of years ago in downtown Portland. That was very effective at managing water quality. So we're going to apply that same technology here at this site. We're going to be collecting data in the water, both upstream and downstream of the work area. So we'll know if we have any issues associated with water quality during the construction process. And the testing is not just going to be the physical parameters like, do we see cloudy water? It'll also be chemicals. We'll be able to determine whether there's any actual chemicals present in the liquids work in the area around the work zone. The other thing we need to make sure of is this mixing technology that we want to use, the materials we're inserting. We want to make sure, given the consistency of the materials that we have at Gasco, that we can get a nice, even distribution of this treatment material into the sediments. And so we're going to be making sure at this site, with the kind of sediments we have, that we have really good blending of this treatment material during the advancement of these augers. And then the last thing we want to do is we want to make sure the equipment we've identified here is the right equipment. We want to make sure the materials we've identified are the right materials. We want to make sure the approach that we're taking in staging equipment and using equipment is effective and efficient. So these are all really important decisions that we're going to be getting information about. All of this information will then be used in the design. So when we submit our next design document to EPA, it'll be informed by all these lessons learned. So what are we actually doing? Well, we have about 1,750 square foot area that we're going to be treating. It goes down about 30 feet. So that's about 2,000 yards of material that we'll be treating as part of this pilot test. We're doing it now. We are in the water, mobilizing. We've got our plants being installed in the uplands right now. We have our moon pools assembled. We're going to be mobilizing them to the property later this week. Next week, we're going to start debris removal to make sure we have nothing in the way when we start putting this treatment material down. And then sometime later next week, once all of that is done, we'll start installing the treatment materials. Everybody's aware of the in-water work window in the Willamette. It's a good thing, it protects the fish, but it gives us a hard stop. We have to be done by the end of October. So we've got about 6 weeks, and we believe we can accomplish all of the work that you're about to see here in that period of time. I mentioned moon pools. We have 2 because one's not enough. The one you see on the left is a structure that we've assembled and built. And we assembled this at Hickey Marine. It's right across the Columbia River in Vancouver. I'm going to show you the underlying structure of this in the next slide. But you can see it's a large platform. The yellow piece of equipment you see there is what we call a bower rig. That's the rig that will be driving the augers that will be injecting the treatment material into the sediments. It's going to do that through that opening there. And the opening is called a moon pool. And there's going to be curtains all the way around the moon pool that go from the top of the water to the bottom to the bottom of the river to keep any disturbed water contained while we do the treatment technology. On the right-hand side is another moon pool. And you can see that that's at the end of a barge. That's the moon pool that we're going to use to remove swell. And I'm going to talk about swell in a minute. But we're going to use an excavator to reach through that and then remove excess material we have at the end of the treatment process. And so that will also contain any water quality issues that we identify as we disturb the ground. And again, while all of this is happening, we'll be collecting water quality samples from the surrounding area. Okay, I'm going to apologize in advance because these are technical drawings that I'm just sharing here because they actually show a lot of detail. And I'm going to do my best to walk through what you're seeing. So the red box that's in the center on the top, the left moon pool, is that large red float that you saw in the left picture on the previous slide. All those black outline boxes that you see in that red square are individual floats that were combined to create that larger moon pool system. So that's the structure underneath the deck of that barge. The blue and yellow circles that you see there are what we call honeycomb. Each individual circle is what we call a column. And those columns are what we're going to be advancing with that Bower rig and injecting the treatment material as that rig mixes those treatment materials with the sediments. And so all of these columns overlap each other. There's not going to be any gaps between them. And so the entire project will be complete when each of those circles is installed. The reason there's two colors is because we're trying two doses of the treatment technology that we've identified. We have a mix of material that we're going to be adding to the sediments, and we're going to mix it in at 14% and 16%, and we're going to see which of those works best. On the right lower, that's just a blow up of what you see on the top right. And then the upper right-hand square is just the moon pool that you saw in the previous photo on the right. That's a moon pool at the end of the barge. This is where they're going to be positioned offshore. So on the first slide I showed you that had a picture of the project and it had a yellow outline. That's pretty much the location of this box relative to the shoreline. This is what it looks like in profile. If you are if you're in a boat looking at the work from the river, and if you could see through the water, this shows you the barge that's going to be fixed in place above the treatment area. It shows you the colored columns extending down from that red platform. That's the barge. The yellowish area that you see blocking out the river is the curtain. So that shows you a curtain going to be all the way around it. Through that curtain, that drill rig will be pushing the treatment materials into those colored columns. And the blue box on the bottom, what that shows you is the depth of contamination at the site. So the dotted line where the curtain ends is the river bottom. The thick double dotted line below that is the depth of contamination. And so those blue and pink and yellow columns that you see there are the zones of treatment that go from the river surface or the riverbed surface down below the depth of contamination. And so the box that you see up there, that's an expansion of the smaller box, just shows you that in all of the columns that we install, we're going to go at least a foot below contamination in our mixing. This is the swell removal barge. And this then is a piece of equipment that's on the barge, the moon pool that you saw on the right-hand photo. And so what we'll be doing here is scooping down and removing swell. And swell is simply the material that's left over after we're done treating the material. We're injecting material, so we're creating more volume of material than we had when we started. But we have to keep the riverbed at the same elevation as when we started. So we have to remove the excess material. And so we'll be removing this treated material, and then that will be taken for disposal as treated material. So I know that's a lot, and I wanted to leave time for questions.